I've been saying this all day, Chris, is that in the history of the NBA, we have a precedent. Chris Mannix writes for The Vertical. He does Boston, and he's a huge talent. I've asked my bosses 9 times to hire him, so here we go, Chris. So let's start with this, Chris. The NBA, if you lose a star and you don't get a star back, you generally lose the trade. My proposition is Andrew Wiggins. Minnesota wants Kyrie. Andrew Wiggins is a star, and I think it would appease LeBron if you said, okay, Derrick Rose, Wiggins, Kyrie's out. We match up better. We'll start with that, Chris. The Wiggins idea. Your thoughts?
I like the idea, and it certainly fills a couple of boxes for Cleveland. First, it gives you a guy that can help you win right away. He's a scorer that I think under LeBron would only get better.
Yeah.
I think he can become a better defensive player because of his athleticism, though he hasn't shown it up until this point. But I think a bold move can be made here, Colin, with Minnesota. If I'm Cleveland, I would also want Jeff Teague in this. I mean, look, I lived in New York last year. I saw Derrick Rose. He's not good. I mean, he is a below-average shooter. He is a below-average defender. How he fits in as a pick-and-roll player alongside LeBron James, I just don't know. You still need a starting-caliber point guard. And to me, Jeff Teague is still a starting-caliber point guard. He's a guy that shot in the high 30s from 3 last year. He's an 8 assists per game player. The issue is that he can't be traded until December 15th.
That's right.
He was an off-season signee. You can't trade him. It would be a bold move for the Cavaliers to bring Kyrie Irving back, to basically tell him to shut up, and then wait till the 15th and make that Wiggins deal involving Jeff Teague. Because I just think it can't just be Wiggins-centric. It can't just be about Andrew Wiggins. You've got to get more than that. And if you added Jeff Teague to that mix, that would make you better than you would be now with Wiggins.
Yes.
And protect you even further in the future.
Yeah, listen, if you told me Jeff Teague, LeBron James, Andrew Wiggins, Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson, I think that's better than last year's Cavs. I really do. I think that's I think it's a more explosive team. By the way, Wiggins is 6'7", 6'8". He could defend Durant. I mean, nobody defends him, but he can be a little bit of an obstacle. Now, I trust The Vertical implicitly. I love Woj. You know that. But I keep hearing Boston's in the driver's seat. Chris, why would I want picks? Why would I want Isaiah Thomas? I don't get that argument.
Well, it depends on what your mindset is if you're Cleveland. If you're Cleveland, and look, that was the most bland, non-committal press conference I've heard an executive and an owner give. You really got no indication from them which way they want to go. And frankly, that's kind of smart. I mean, right now, Cleveland's radioactive. I mean, you don't want to make a deal in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks anyway. You have got to make teams believe that you're willing to bring Kyrie Irving into training camp. You can't operate from a position of desperation. That's only going to get you a mediocre offer from teams out there. So that's first. And with Boston, look, if they want to go in a direction where they think that LeBron's going to leave, and Boston puts a Tatum and other players like Jaylen Brown and picks like the ones they have next year on the table, you and I may not agree with it. You and I may say that they're detonating their chances of retaining LeBron long term, but they know what at least they think they know what their chances are of retaining LeBron. If they think it's likely he leaves no matter what, then getting a Boston package back in return is paramount. But I'll tell you this, Colin, maybe the most underreported story of this offseason is Isaiah Thomas's hip injury. Danny Ainge just came out yesterday and said Isaiah Thomas doesn't need hip surgery. The fact that we're in late July and we're still wondering if Isaiah Thomas, who was hurt in late May, might need hip surgery is astonishing. And if I was a team looking to make a blockbuster deal with Boston that would include Isaiah Thomas, I wouldn't go near him with a 10-foot pole until he shows for at least a month into the regular season that he's past that hip injury. Outside of the foot, the hip injury is the most significant NBA injury that you could have. It detonated the career of Johnny Flynn. LaMarcus Aldridge had it a couple of years back. Kevin Looney had it last year with the Warriors. This is a 4 to 6 month injury if it requires surgery, and who knows how a small player bounces back for it. So we can discuss Boston all we want, but if Isaiah Thomas, if he's part of this, of any kind of conversation, you'd be nuts if you're Cleveland to touch him with this hip injury looming.
Chris Mannix, The Vertical. There's a spoiled child sometimes with Kyrie. 1-year guy, played at Duke, not answering calls now. He said he's going to retire early. How is this landing? My mom used to always say, sometimes you're better seen than heard. How is this landing with execs? Are there execs that are like, we're not sure Kyrie's all in for 4 or 5 years?
No, I'll be honest, and I've talked to at least 2 executives that have checked in with Cleveland that are eager to take on Kyrie Irving, and they don't have any such fear with him. I mean, look, Cleveland is and has been for Kyrie, and you've heard this before. I mean, such a combustible situation over the last 6 years. I mean, since his draft and LeBron coming in, it's just been kind of organized chaos over there for a while. And teams really believe that if you get Kyrie into a situation where he's happy to be there and he wants to be there and he's choosing to be there, that all this other stuff would go away. I do think that it's a mortal lock that in 3 or 4 years, if Kyrie's traded before the start of the season, somebody's going to write a story or he's going to do an interview where he talks about how he regrets how things ended in Cleveland. If he winds up in Phoenix and he's playing on a 25-win team for 2 or 3 years, guys don't appreciate success until it's gone.
Yep.
And Kyrie's had a lot of success. And just like Stephon Marbury in Minnesota, just like Shaq and Kobe, we'll be reading about Kyrie Irving regretting doing what he's doing right now.
I remember when LeBron was deciding about Cleveland and he left and went to Miami. And I remember talking to Stephen A. Smith, and he had a good contacts with Maverick Carter and those guys. And they didn't know. Maverick didn't know 2 or 3 days before. And then when LeBron went back home, Lee Jenkins had it, but it caught a lot of people off guard, right, Chris?
Yeah.
It feels like, though, this time that LeBron has moved twice. Chris, maybe I'm reaching here, but it kind of feels like LeBron's a year out and he's at least he's ahead of where he was in his last 2 moves. That's how it feels to me. Do you think he's looking at a LA or a Houston already right now?
Oh, absolutely. And everybody across the league thinks he's doing that right now as well. I mean, this is not a player that acts impulsively. Everything he does and has done over the last 7-8 years has been calculated. From the move to Miami to the move back to Cleveland, none of these decisions were settled upon when his final regular season game was over. So he's looking out there, and I'll be honest, I'm fascinated by what Houston's trying to do here. I don't believe that Daryl Morey thinks that Carmelo Anthony is going to move him closer to Golden State and winning a championship. In fact, I think Houston's probably terrified of a Carmelo and Mike D'Antoni reunion and how that might blow up again like it did in New York. But what you need to realize about that team is that all of a sudden you add Carmelo to that mix, and you have 2 of LeBron's closest friends in the league playing for them. You have James Harden, a former USA basketball teammate who LeBron has enormous respect for. That would be a season next year, which they'd be trying to win, but at the same time, those guys would be texting LeBron. They'd be communicating with LeBron. They would be letting it known to him that he could step in there, be the small forward alongside Carmelo in a 4 position, and that he'd fit in perfectly. That, to me, is the most intriguing team. The Lakers are what they are. They're kind of unpredictable right now. They're probably not going to be very good. But Houston, if they got to the conference finals with a Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, James Harden team, in my mind, they would immediately become the front runner to land LeBron James.